up, everybody? Welcome to the Blended Couple on Fire podcast, season 3, episode 22. Today, we're actually going to be talking about questions to ask yourself if your kid is using drugs. That's coming up
right now.
Are you a Christian and you are looking to take your faith, your family, and your future to the next level?
Then this is the channel for you.
What is up? Hey, when nobody was looking, Christy was trying to put her finger in my drink. You know, the stuff people get under their nails? Like, that's the last thing I need floating around in my drink. And that's the problem is we have dogs, right? So every once in a while you see a hair floating around in your drink and you just wonder how many of those that you actually drink per day.
Yeah. We drink a lot of hair.
I'm one of your hosts, Josh. This is my beautiful wife, Christy. She got the whale tail hairdo kicking it today, people. Because she knows I like anything to do with water.
Oh my gosh.
So
you don't like the whale tail, actually.
I don't mind it.
I'm just doing it today
because
neat. I don't care.
If you shook your head up and down, it'd be like flapping.
No, I don't want to mess it up right now.
Don't mess your hair up. Well, so today, this is going to be a fun episode. Do you have anything you want to talk about or share, get off your chest before we get started today?
Oh.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Nothing.
No.
Okay. All right.
I got lots of stuff to share during, though.
Yeah, we got lots of stuff to talk about.
We got a lot of our own experience.
We have too much experience in this. Yeah, so the whole reason why we're even doing this episode today, okay, so this is just full transparency. We had somebody reach out to us over the weekend and mention something that they're having some serious struggles with their kid/stepkid that's been dabbling in drugs. Now, we don't know the extent of it, but I also said to the person, I'm like, look, we're going to do our next episode on this because this is very relevant. Like, this is something that I believe many, many, many families deal with, whether we want to deal with it or not, is our kids messing with drugs. And I think it's even harder in the Christian community because it's super taboo. Like, oh my gosh, it must be something that the parents did wrong. Mm-hmm. If your kids, are on the drugs, snorting the marijuana, whatever it is, that's going on. But, I think that it's, there's some questions, and Christy and I really came up with, we got about 5, 6 of them here that we want to talk about. It's specific questions really you should be asking yourself. And so that's kind of what we want to dig into today. So before we kick off, I want to make sure that I get a chance to share this. So if you have anything you want to say.
Oh, yeah.
Please
so
do.
I have to talk during the dead air time. So Josh has
no dead air
time to share things. But I think it was a relevant topic, that this person actually in our group reached out and asked for prayers and for help, which is what the group is supposed to be for. It's supposed to be for support and encouragement. And it is a real topic that not just blended families deal with, that all families deal with, especially when it comes to teenage kids in this day and age. Josh and I talked a lot about when we were growing up, when we were teenagers, it really wasn't relevant with drugs. It was alcohol primarily, that alcohol and cigarettes, that people were going out and doing and chew. Ew. Those types of things. Not so much. I mean, of course, there was marijuana. Of course, at certain parties, you would have mushrooms and acid, but it wasn't these like really heavy drugs that you hear are prominent. You don't hear about kids going out and drinking and getting drunk anymore. It is getting high and using harder drugs even.
Yeah. Much harder. Like, I mean, it's funny because Christy and I make jokes all the time, like, ooh, the devil's lettuce. I think that was from a movie.
It was.
Christy says that, right? Talking about marijuana. Marijuana has really become a huge thing in the last, 10 years. Yeah. Now, I say huge thing, right? It's probably always been to somewhat, but now with like legal reasons, like they're making it more legal in a lot more states, and all this stuff. It's like, it seems like that's the drug like you have to battle with your children. It's not so much alcohol, or even cigarettes. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just social circles we're in anymore.
Thank God for that. Okay, small miracles.
Yeah, right. But we both come from addiction, right? So Christy and I both are celebrating over 10 years. I mean, she's 10 years, I'm 12 years of sobriety from alcohol, clean and clear of. So we've been in that world. We lived in that world for a lot of years, drugs, alcohol. Like, we understand it. And we understand the effects of what it can have on you and that the devastation that it can have. So when we personally dealt with children dabbling with that stuff, it throws us right into freak out mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Straight into freak
Like,
out mode.
they're going to grow up and be homeless and on the street.
Yeah.
And that is just where your head, if you're honest,
Yeah.
that's just where your head goes.
Instantly. You're thinking brown paper bag and didn't shave for 15 years, sleeping on the street. Like, that's what we thought.
Yeah.
And we think to ourselves, right? Like, we run a recovery ministry, right? We have cleaned our life up. Like, we have shown our kids the right way, and then they still end up doing these things.
Right.
Like, we have ultimately failed as a parent. And
Right.
that's just not the case. Like, you need to know, like, if you're on here, you're watching this, you're listening to this, you need to know that that's just not how it works. Like, you only have so much control. That's why we have these specific questions we want to talk about tonight. When it comes to things that your children do, it's really about how we handle it. It's how we handle it. It's how our reaction to it after the fact is really what makes the longevity, that makes the long-term plan actually work. So.
Yes.
All right. So number one, the first question we think that you should ask yourself if your kids are using any type of drugs. Now, we consider alcohol a drug.
Yeah.
Right?
Chemical dependency.
Any type of chemical dependency. Right. Number one, have you talked to him or her about it?
So I know that this seems obvious, but you would be surprised how many parents they want to be like an ostrich and stick their head in the sand type of thing.
Run from it.
And just hope, like, if they sneak down to their room and steal it all, that they'll not realize that it's gone, and they'll realize the error of their ways and never do it again. Or they're uncomfortable having the hard conversations and they want someone else to do it. And instead of just sitting down and saying, have you talked to them about it? And a lot of that is because we lack solutions. That's the only reason why a lot of parents don't want to sit down and talk to their kids about it. They're scared of the answers that they're going to get.
So true.
They don't want to hear that the kid isn't going to stop, that they don't want to stop, that this is something that they're going to continue doing. And they don't know the proper answers or the proper things to do. So they feel like they're in weird waters. Like, how much should you force them? What should you take away? How much should you punish them? If they're going to continue to do it and they want to do it, are you really ever going to be able to stop them? Yeah. So you lack the knowledge, the resources, and the backbone. And that's the reason why you avoid the conversation. So that what you need to do is educate yourself. Find out afterwards, you educate yourself and what your plan's going to be, what your solutions are going to be. Have the hard conversation and know what your solutions are going to be for either answer. If they say, nope, I'm going to continue to do it, I don't see anything wrong with it, it's just what are you going to do?
Yep.
If they're like, I'm really sorry, I'm so glad that you found it out, I really want to change, what are you going to do? Yep. Because if they say that, that's when they're really going to be depending on you to have answers. So you need to research yourself first, not approach the situation emotionally. Want to yell, scream, all of those things. You need to have valid solutions that you can feel confident in.
I think that's why it's so important. And we've talked about this before, and I think we've talked about it many times, but understanding how to use conflict resolution well. I think the majority of people, and I mean, I would say better than 80% of the population has poor conflict resolution skills. So when your child is doing something that you wholeheartedly are fearful of, which you would be if your kid's using drugs, right? You're scared. You don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. You just want it to go away. You want to pray that it's a phase. Like, you do these things, but ultimately how you handle those or deal with those, most parents, is they avoid it. And Christy said, this seems like a simple one, right? But it's not as simple as what we think it is. Most parents do avoid these hard conversations. It's no different than the sex situation with your children, talking to them about that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about drugs and alcohol and talking about these things, confront your child, but do it in a healthy way with healthy conflict resolution. I love what Christy said. You have to have a plan going into the discussion. Right? Like, what is your plan? What is your plan if they say, I'm sorry, like, I did, it's something I experimented with, I learned my lesson, I'm not doing it again. Okay, what's the plan moving forward? It's not, okay, let's give them a thumbs up. Right. What's the plan? And then what if they say, no, this is my new thing, right? I want to do drugs all day, every day. Okay, well, what's the plan then? And I think that's healthy conflict resolution. But the worst thing you can do is not have that discussion with your child. And pretend that it's just going to go away on its own, because it won't. Mm-hmm. It won't, right?
Right, correct.
All right, number 2. Have you talked to your spouse?
Right, especially in blended families.
Especially.
It needs to be done, because
especially
when it's, okay, my oldest, we had issues with him smoking pot on more than one occasion. He'd get caught. he'd say he was sorry, especially after his first time. And then gradually it just happened again. And he'd get caught. And then it was like he wasn't remorseful about it at all. And when it's not your kid, he is going to be, we talked about this in the last podcast, he may be able to open up my eyes a little bit to, I'm being too lenient on him. Like, okay, no, we should do these things. And a parent, he's not going to struggle with, oh, I failed him as a parent. He's not going to struggle with that the same way that I struggle with it. Yep. So he can help me see the error of my ways a little bit in that. But then also it could have him be too hard on him because he's not biologically his child. He can be like, kick him out. He wasn't. But, know, in blended families, there can be a step parent that's like that because they don't have them same heartstrings, not the same bio heartstrings that the parent does. So in a blended family, you really need to talk to your spouse because you guys really need to balance each other out and see it from both sides. Be able to see it from a non-bio parent standard, like what could you, because we counsel people all the time in Celebrate Recovery, also with their kids. Not everyone that comes to Celebrate, only a third of the people that come to Celebrate Recovery actually struggle with the chemical dependency. A lot of these people come with codependency, and that codependency is on kids that struggle with drugs or a spouse that struggles with drugs. So we counsel people all the time on what the steps that they should do as far as tough love. It's still love though. People forget in that word tough the love portion of it. Yeah. So in a blended family, you have to talk with your spouse. You guys have to have a plan going into it because you don't need the step parent freaking out if the kid's like, yep, I'm going to continue doing it. Like, get out, you're moving out. Like, you guys have to have a plan together of how you're going to approach this in both outcomes. If they say this, what are we going to do?
Yep.
If they say this, what are we going to do? Yep. And there's really only two. I mean, there's lots of things they can say, but there's really only two outcomes. Either they're sorry and they want to change, or they're not sorry and they're going to continue to do it.
Yeah, forget you. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's too, I mean, let's just be real, right? Blended families, right? If one person's kid, let's just say my kid is the one that's doing all of this wrong stuff and Christy's kids, aren't doing it. Christy's going to think to herself, I don't want your kid rubbing off on my kid.
True.
I don't want that happening.
Yep.
I don't want your kid doing that. So your kid, he or she needs to go.
True.
She needs to go. He needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a really, really hard thing to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand that when you have a blended family, you have to look at it just like it's a non-blended family. Would you do that with your children? Would you say, sorry, you're now on Exile Island, you have to live with grandma because you got caught smoking pot, and you won't quit? No, you don't do that. You
didn't have the option.
You don't get that option. Exactly right. You have to get into, problem-solving mode. And I think a lot of times, especially in blended families, it gets to be like, not my kid, not my problem. And so you need to go take care of this. And if it doesn't get taken care of, there's going to be consequences to be had. And that creates disunity between you two in a marriage. Mm-hmm. You got to say to each other, like, okay, let's help figure this out. What do we need to do? And that is me supporting if she's the one, like if it was her son. And don't get me wrong, my kid did the same as her kid, okay? My oldest did the same exact thing, throwing up all over the carpet because he got all super high one night, right? And my poor little baby boy that I never thought would ever do that did it, okay? And that's just the truth. And that blows up in your face. And you think to yourself, okay, how are we going to handle this moving forward?
Right.
And is Christy going to give me good advice that's going to challenge me without offending me? And that's our job as spouses to do that. So we got to have these hard discussions with each other, in our family unit and say, this is our family. Breaking up the family is not an option.
Correct.
That's not an option.
Correct.
Solving the problem is the only option. And how are we going to do that? Does it mean that we're going to do everything right and the kid's going to stop doing it? No. That's not always the outcome. But how are we going to protect everybody else in the family and protect the kid that is doing the things that are doing? And there is solutions to be had for that without saying, sorry, you're not welcome here anymore.
Well, you need to talk to your spouse too, because if you are honest, in today's society, drugs are rampant in the high schools, rampant. And if your kid goes to a Christian school, you're sadly mistaken if you think it's not there too. A lot of times it's worse there because pastors' kids are wanting to show that they're not these goody two-shoe kids.
Yeah.
So it's rampant in the school community. So you need to start addressing these problems. We're addressing it once you already are aware of it, but you really need to, if you haven't and you're watching this and your kid hasn't yet, you need to start talking to them about drugs now.
Yeah. Earlier better.
It's so in the schools. You think it's not, it's untrue. Davison Schools has drug dogs that go in the school on a pretty frequent basis.
They have
and
to.
go through the schools and sniff lockers and everything else. It's still in the schools. The kids are still selling it out of their car, whatever they need to do.
4th, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade up. Like, it's crazy.
And homeschooling kids, I hope you're talking to them. I know we have a lot of people in our church that homeschool their kids. That is doing them a little bit of a disservice when it comes to getting out once they graduate school and move out on their own. These are going to be all new things and they have to, like, you think it's not in the workplace. It is
huge.
It's people are doing drugs, selling drugs, going to lunch to do drugs in the workplaces. So if you homeschool your kids, they may be safe because they're not going to school, but you need to educate them because they're not going to know how to handle it then when they grow up or go to college. You're not going to college at them at home.
Yeah.
These things need to be addressed.
Yeah, and I think the Christian community is getting to be, especially due to COVID, they're leaning closer into doing homeschooling. And I think, and there is, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of socialism with homeschooling. A lot of homeschoolers get together and they do all these things. But that's just because kids now have a little more freedom. It can cause a bigger problem.
Yeah.
It actually can cause a bigger problem. That's why what Christy's saying is so important, is educating and having these difficult conversations earlier, the better.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about it. Like, mom and dad knows what this smells like. We know what it looks like. Like, we're not dumb. We know when you come home.
You're like this.
Yeah, we know when your pupils are the size of saucers. Like, we know what's going on. Like, we're not dumb to it. And we only want you to know this because we care about you.
Yeah.
We understand, like, we've been where you've been. Whether you have been a parent that's used drugs or not, educate yourself on it so you do know, like, what to look for and how to get it early on so it doesn't become a problem later on. And that's why I think I'm glad that you brought this up, is like, yeah, we may be talking to you right now and you have a child right now today that's deep into it, and that's a harder thing to deal with. But the earlier on you can handle, talking to your kids about it and educating yourself, the better off you're going to be. Doesn't mean they won't do it, but it gives you a much better opportunity to educate them and talk them through it so it doesn't become a big problem.
And Cassie is saying, like, what age do you think is good for this conversation? We had the DARE program in school, and they started talking to us throughout the DARE program in middle school. Now, middle school for me when I was in school was 6th grade. Middle school at Davison is 5th, I think, grade.
Yeah.
But I think that's an appropriate age because you'd be shocked how young some of the kids are. That
it's a maturity thing too.
Yeah, it is a maturity thing.
Yeah, it's a maturity thing too.
Yeah.
I think Christy's right. You kind of get into, like, between the 4th and 6th grade. I think it really starts to get heavy in 6th grade for these kids, depending on the school district.
Than boys, though.
And they do. So, it depends on really the type of relationship you have with your children. You're having these difficult, conversations. What do you feel comfortable with? And I really, really highly have to tell you, like, something that's really important is have the discussion with your partner, with your spouse first, and then have this discussion together. Now, especially when it comes to drugs, maybe not the sex question, sex stuff like that, it's different, it's spouse, it's different. But when it comes to drugs, like, you want to have that together, Now, I will talk to my bio kids about it, and depending on how long you've been in your relationship, in your family as a blended family, the partner can, kick in, your spouse can kick in some stuff. But I think it's really important to let them know, like, none of us were fooled, but we're all on your team to make this a better situation for you and for us. It's important that we do that. But yeah, I think it's a maturity thing.
Well, and talking to the spouse, like, once the kids got to be 17, 18 years old, I mean, even his daughter, Jordan, we struggled with this stuff with long before little Josh and Garrett.
Yeah.
She's 6 years older than
them. Yeah, it was years.
And it got to the point, though, once they're 18, 19 years old, if you've already caught them once, you do question, you may be paranoid. So if they come home and, he would be like, I think she might be on something. I mean, what are we going to do? Like, she's not going to be honest if we ask her. She doesn't smell like it. We don't really know. We might be kind of paranoid right now at this point. We're not going to go in her bedroom, start rummaging through her stuff while she's in there. So it's like, what are we going to do about it if she is right now? Yeah. I mean, she's not causing bodily harm to anybody. We don't really know if she is. She could be. But you have to pick your battles in those situations too, and your spouse, and you need to talk that out. Because if you have already talk to them about it, you've already went down this road, and now you're questioning everything that they do. I got into doing that with my son. He had to check me a lot because almost every single time I'm like, oh, he's probably high. because I was just so like angry about it. And he's like, we don't know that, you every time he leaves the house, he's not going to get drugs, type of thing. But I would think that way sometimes. And so it's good to talk things through with your spouse, because sometimes you can be paranoid about it and you really don't have a solution if you're going to do something.
No, Christy's ex-husband one time called her, and we were at the church. We're actually getting ready to celebrate recovery. Called him up and goes, I need to bring your son up there. I think he's high. I need you to look at him and tell me if he's high.
I know. I'm like, have you asked him?
Right.
And
brought
he's
him
like,
up.
no, I don't get him. I only get him every other weekend. I don't want him mad at me. I'm like, bring him up to the church. Yeah. I'll talk to him.
And he was not.
No,
he was not. He was like, I don't know what the problem. I mean, Christy's oldest was like, I don't know what the problem is. Like, what's going on?
Well, first off, his dad brought him up to the church. Like, I'm taking you up to see your mom. And Garrett's like, why?
Yeah.
So he comes in the church and he comes in the office and he sits down with Josh and I. And I'm just like, listen, your dad thinks you're high. Are you high? Like, I'm going to ask you a question. I need you to be honest with me. Yeah. Okay. It is what it is at this point. It's not like the first time that we've caught you doing something. Just be honest.
Yep.
Are you? Yep. And he's just like, no, look at me, type of thing. And he wasn't, but.
Yeah, because we had created a relationship strong enough with him where you can start to understand whether the kid's telling you the truth or not the truth, right?
Yeah.
We had enough of these frequent conversations.
Yeah.
And I don't mean
he was honest.
And I don't mean berating situations or berating conversations, because I don't think those are healthy.
No.
I think having open conversations with your kid on a frequent basis is really important, but not like you're doing it, all the time. Like, that's not helpful, because they're never going to be open with you. But we had done that enough to
about
where
our fears. We talked to him about our fears.
Absolutely.
Like, listen,
we've been there, done that.
We're scared for you because, of course, you're doing this, and we are thinking you're going to end up homeless. You're going to end up doing heroin. You're going to be a heroin addict, living on the street, like wanting to get your next hit. That's the fears that parents struggle with. So of course we need to talk to you about this. You've made the decision. Now you have to sit through the lectures. I'm sorry.
That's it.
Type of thing. And
we always did it calmly, though.
Calmly.
Very
calm. And so it was,
was the calm before the storm.
It was. I mean, we developed a really good relationship with him to be able to talk with him about it. And it didn't start out. I mean, the very first time he got caught, it wasn't.
It was a 2 a.m. on a workday phone call. You need to come get your kid.
And I was definitely sick. Like,
at a friend's house.
Sick.
Yeah.
So sick. And I had to get up for work like 2 hours later. And I
didn't see that coming either.
No. That was the first time, and
it blindsided us.
Mm-hmm, we were like, "Oh, they must be fighting. They must have gotten a fist fight. They're teenagers." Yeah.
We weren't ready for it.
Didn't even consider, which was weird.
And I think I got a little heated in the van.
You did.
Yeah, I got a little heated, and I apologized later for that.
Yeah,
because it wasn't the proper response. I was mad. I was mad because Christy didn't feel good. We had to get up in the middle of the night. It's embarrassing. We had to go pick him up at a friend's house, all this stuff. And it was just not handled well in the beginning. That's how now we can tell you, like, don't handle it that way. Take your time and talk about it with your spouse. And then Christy should have been the one, not me, screaming at him in the van, like at the top of my lungs.
I was sick, so.
Using 4-letter words I should not be using. Okay? I was not happy about it.
Well, anyway.
So number 3.
Let's move on.
Number 3. She won't talk about it no more. Number 3, have you talked to your kid's youth pastor? I mean, we are Christians, so.
So everyone that watching this podcast, we are under the assumption that you're a Christian because we, say that we're Christians. It's a Christian-based podcast. God should be at the center of everything, and that's why the first couple, like, have you talked to him or her, like your child about it? Have you talked to your spouse about it? Pray with your child when you're talking to them about it. Pray with your spouse before you're talking to them about it. But it's always important to bring outside mentorship in. If you have a child that you found out they're doing drugs or they've come clean that they're doing drugs, it is important to bring in a safe person, preferably a member of your church, to mentor them. Especially, like, Garrett got mentored by our lead pastor for a few months before COVID hit, and COVID shut everything down, shut the schools down. But our youth pastor, I think he met with our youth pastor a few times even before that. about it. It's important that other people are speaking into your kids besides just the two of you,
Yeah.
especially godly people that can really bring more biblical knowledge into it. And maybe the kids might feel safer in having honest, like really just raw, honest emotions. Because a lot of the times with teenagers, when they're living at home, a lot of their angry feelings or the emotions that they're dealing with, besides their friends and stuff like that, have to do with you. Have to do with the blended family, have to do with making them having to go to church and being part of a blended family. And, maybe they don't like Josh, they do, but maybe they don't. Maybe his kids don't like me really deep down. They put up with me type of thing. It's important for kids to have a safe place and the youth pastor or the lead pastor or a pastor that is mentoring them should know they don't need to share every single thing with you unless it's going to be a detriment to your home or it's going to be harmful to someone in your family or someone to themselves. Like if they're maybe wanting to self-harm themselves, that's when they really need to tell you. But that safety should be there always, that they can talk to this person and get good biblical advice. And then you can be entrusting in that. Like, I know that they're going to give them. I know they're on the side of our family. I know that they're going to be a good mentor for them.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially as Christians, we have a really hard time with this because we don't want our church to know that our kids are suffering, with this type of stuff. And, what we need to do is focus on what's best for our children, what's best for the kids. And what's best for our kids is to get the best type of biblical advice and help that they possibly can. And so getting your staff that's at your church, involved, the pastors at your church, especially the youth pastor. And then, what makes really awesome for our church is our lead pastor was a youth pastor for like 16 years. So
correct.
That really is a good combination for us in our situation. And now it's not true for everybody's. But it's really important that you do, and mentorship is such an important aspect of it. Giving your children somebody that they can talk to and maybe setting up a continued regimen where they go and say, you know what? We found out about this. This is part of our plan. This is our action plan that we're going to do, for the next 12 months, once a month or once every 2 weeks. You are to meet with such and such for 1 hour, and this is just part of it. It's part of the plan, right? This is the result of your actions, and this is what we do. And this really does give them an opportunity to go and maybe create a special bond, because pastors have a special ability, to really share God's heart and word with them and say, hey, I care about you. And that's what I love about youth pastors is they speak on a different level than what we do as parents do to our own kids. And it really gives an opportunity for them to connect on a different level, just like Christy said, than what we do as parents.
Well, and if you don't want to tell your church, you don't want to tell the church for one of three reasons. Number one is you don't want to tell them because you don't have a supportive church or you're in fear of what the retaliation from the church would be. I don't think that's true. God's love coming through in that church. That's a completely separate thing. The other two things are you don't want to be held accountable. So you're putting on a fake facade, or you don't want your fake facade to come clean. You want everybody to think that you're this perfect, glorious, floating on clouds, halos over your head family. So it's the first one. That's something that you need to correct. If you're going to a church that you don't feel safe enough to go talk to someone, maybe you should think about switching churches. The other two, though, if you don't want to be held accountable, people don't want to be held accountable to be accountable to their kids. A lot of times it's easier to turn the other cheek, especially as a blended family, and not deal with things because of the turmoil it can cause. Yep. And it takes hard work to address things head on and to fix things. So you don't want to be held accountable by your pastor to your kids to hold them accountable. Or two, you don't want your fake facade to come clean. You don't want anybody to know that there's any possible thing wrong with your family. Yeah. And those are internal things that you need to correct in and of yourself.
Your perfect Christian image.
Right.
Which is a joke.
And what Christian is perfect, honestly? We all say that. Like, no Christian's perfect. Like, we're all sinners. But yet, we treat ourselves, when it comes to going in the church, like we're perfect. Like, no one can know anything's wrong. Because we're smiles. Right. So it's like, practice what you preach, people.
I agree. And I think we have to humble ourselves before doing things like that. Like Christy said, maybe you are part of a church, but let's make sure you're honest with yourself about how you are first before you blame the church for the way that you are. So that's a real important step. But I want to talk about this thing real quick before we jump to the next one that Cassie said. She goes, what do you do? And I'm actually going to put it on the screen. What do you do if one of the parents or a lot of family members are alcoholics? Well, boy, can we talk about this. So I don't want to speak about Christy's ex, but my ex definitely has addiction issues on all levels: alcohol, drugs, the whole works, right? The gamut. Yeah, Christy likes talking about that. So, and that's just the truth of it. Everybody knows it, and that's just how it is. So how do I handle that influence? So I heard something a long time ago that's really stuck with me. It says that if you were to move to a new city and you're a contractor and you've been contracted to build the greatest building in the entire city, you can do one of two things. You can choose to build the biggest, most beautiful building in the entire city, or you can build a mediocre building and then tear every other building down. And I think you have to really look at it like that. How are we encouraging our kids? Are we talking bad about their parents? Are we going that method, or are we just trying to be the greatest influence that we can on our children? Because we cannot change what happens on the other side. We have zero control over that. Okay. And that's been one of the hardest things for me personally. Okay, I still struggle with that I don't have enough control about what goes on the other side. But the only way that we can control that is by our own influence into our kids. How often are we talking to him or he or she about these things? How influential are we trying to be to outweigh those things? How are we sharing in that sense? I think it's so important that we do that, because you can't control it.
Well, there was a time that his son came back and said he was uncomfortable going over there and he didn't want to go over there anymore. So he was older. He was probably like 14, 15. And so he told his ex, he's not coming over right now. He's not coming over until you guys can work this out. And it got worked out. But it's really easy to point fingers. So my dad was a raging alcoholic. And my mom was what she would make you believe, a Bible thumping, believing, Christian. And I mean, that just because she didn't drink or do drugs, it doesn't mean she doesn't have her own struggles. But I still went over to my dad's every other weekend. Now, if the child is going to be in physical harm,
that's different.
That's completely different. Yeah. But you divorced that person, the kids didn't, and that's still their other parent, or that's still that other family member. Now, if it's an extended family member and there's chaos every time you go over and get with them because of the drugs and alcohol, you can choose to set up healthy boundaries. We've done podcasts on that before, not to enter into that or do a neutral zone where you can leave when it comes time to leave. Yep. But if you're specifically talking about the other parent, they still need to go spend time with that parent unless they're, homeless on the street or they're physically harming the child when they're over there, which you need to get the court systems involved and all of that as well. But you can't just say, well, they're an alcoholic or they're doing drugs, so I'm not letting my kid go over there. You could get yourself in some massive trouble just because you don't want them. Both of our kids, my kids, their dad drinks heavily, used to get drunk and make up bad songs about our family and sing them to the kids and emotionally hurt them to where they came back and would be upset about it. His kids, we would get calls in the middle of the night saying, you have to come get us because of things that were going on in their mom's homes. And we'd have to get up, go over and pick up his kids. Mm-hmm. But you have to deal with those situations as they come up. You can't point fingers at the other people and say, well, they're just not coming over there anymore unless the child is in physical harm.
Yeah.
There's proper things that you have to go through with the, state.
And that doesn't always work.
Yeah. The state that we're living in. And
it doesn't work. It doesn't always work. You do the best that you can. And that's why I say influence is all we have, because we cannot control. I tried to manipulate. I tried to control. I tried to scream. I tried to convince. I tried everything that I could to change what happened on the other side. And it only got worse for my kids and for myself and for us. And once I learned, okay, it's time for just me to be an influence, for us to be an influence in the most positive sense that we can, is, even my daughter today at 24 years old comes back and just says, thank you so much for, the things that you have done, the influence that you have been, because that's the only thing that we can do. That's all we can do ultimately. I mean, go through the legal system if it's necessary, but that doesn't always work out, at least for guys. You're talking maybe a 3% chance.
You have to prove actual, not even maybe they might get in physical harm. They have to be physically harmed. And that is a detriment of our judicial system and our system, is that it's already happened. The child's already hurt. The child's already abused. These things are happening before anything is done. And I kind of can see the other side of it. You can't do things on the what ifs. You can't make decisions on the what ifs. We say it all the time. So you can't go into a court system and say, well, this is the path I know that this X is heading down. My child is going to end up in physical harm. I want custody of that person, type of thing. It's not, there has to actually be physical harm to the child for it to happen, which sucks,
Yeah, that's a tough situation. I mean, that could probably be a whole podcast all on its own, because we have lived it up until recently. So understand. All right, number 4, have you been honest with yourself? Have you been honest with yourself?
Yeah, so you have to be, I mentioned it a little bit in number 1 about having a plan. A lot of times parents go, like, once they know their kids are doing drugs, I was this person, I would want to sneak down and I would want to go through all their stuff when they weren't at home because I'd want to catch them. But you're secretly thinking, like, I hope I don't catch anything, but I bet you they have something in here, little liars, But but then I wouldn't have a plan. Like, okay, so I find stuff. Now, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like, what's going to be the outcome of this? You have to be honest. Like, okay, if you're going through the things and you're like pretending and hoping that you're not going to find anything, which you probably will, or you wouldn't be going through their stuff. So what are you going to do once you do find something? Are they going to be grounded? Are they going to have things taken away from them? Are they going to be meant to go to a boot camp for the weekend? They have those in Michigan. I don't know if you're not listening to this in Michigan. I'm sure they have them in other places, but they have boot camps, Christian boot camp for the weekend. You can send your kid to as a punishment for it. Are you going to make them start counseling with those, a pastor or something?
Or a mentor.
Yeah. And then I also did this other thing. I was nagging him all the time. So once it got found out, I would constantly be like, he'd be like, oh, I'm going to go to a friend's house. Are you going to do drugs while you're over there? I don't want you to go over there if you're going to do drugs. Too. And every single time, like if you wanted to leave the house, I'm like, what are you going to do? And it was like the distrust. And I had to explain to him eventually, like, you did break the trust. And as a human being in general, when you break the trust with people, sometimes the trust can never come back. Between a parent and a child, the trust can. It just takes time. And you have to put the work in, but you also have to give a little too. So if they're saying, no, I'm not, you have to trust that they're telling you the truth.
Yeah.
Or if you don't even start by, okay, I'm going to choose to trust you that you're telling me the truth. In this, if you're lying to my face, that's on you. But I want to bridge this trust, so I'm going to choose to trust you and believe that you're telling me the truth. And you have to start giving them, this is after, the first couple times and you've punished them and things like that. Don't keep nagging them though. If they're telling you no and you're asking them questions and they're giving you the answer that you want to hear, you have to believe that they're telling you the truth to start bridging that trust again.
Yeah, honesty is a hard thing with ourselves, because I like what Christy says though. Yeah, let's say you go and you snoop and you look. What are you going to do about it? Most of the time, we have no idea. We're going to throw it away. We're going to flush it. But trust me, that doesn't solve the problem.
No.
That does nothing for the problem. If anything, it just makes them mad, and they're probably going to do it more. So being honest with yourself and saying, hey, you know what? All right, I found this. Now I have consequences that I've warned them about. Now it's time to stick up to those.
Right.
And in a blended family, that can be really, really hard. It can be really, really hard, right? So that's why it's important that you are fully honest with yourself and honest with your spouse. Like, okay, this is your kid and this is what we decided before. And you said this is what you were going to stick to. So you need to stick to it, and that can be a really hard thing. Like, oh, this situation's different. You're just not being honest with yourself. You're not being fully honest with yourself about the situation for what it is, and you got to pick your battles with our kids. Like, we have to choose our battles, which is really the last thing I want to talk about here in a minute. But we have to pick our battles when it comes to our children, because we're not going to win them all. We're just not.
Well, in order, if you do want your child to actually change and to stop doing the things that they're doing, I was going through his things in the beginning. He had an 8th grade party over here, and all the boys left to go walk up to the store. Our subdivision there is right behind just stores like Family Dollars and things like that. And it was his 8th grade birthday party. And every single kid that came over here and brought a bag, I went through all of their stuff. All of it.
There was like 18 kids here.
And I only found stuff in one. And out of all of the kids, the one kid I would have said I don't even need to check his stuff. That was the one kid. So, but then what? I threw it away. And then it's not like I'm going to sit down and address all the kids. But what I realized is once these things started happening, I was causing myself more stress than anything. And I sit down and I'm like, okay, I want to build trust with you. You say you're not going to do this stuff. I'm not going to go through your stuff because the kids think you are. And you probably are. So I made a promise to him. Hey, we're not going to put ourselves through the stress to go down when you're not here and rummage through your stuff and go through your stuff. Cause my kids were still going over their dads every other weekend. And one time he came home and he's like, I know you guys are going through my stuff when I'm not here. And we
didn't, not at that time.
No. And I told him, I'm like, I'm not going to go through your stuff anymore. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to go down. I'm not going to have them feel unsafe in the home. Like I'm going through all their private stuff. Kids still want a safe place too.
And they deserve privacy.
They do. Yeah. And I'm not going to be going through your stuff. I'm going to ask you a question and our relationship is built on honesty. And I want you to know that I'm going to ask you occasionally. I'm not going to nag you anymore. But when I ask you, I want you to be honest with me. Yep. Have you been doing it? And if you tell me yes, I need you to man up, take the punishment, take the lecture like you're supposed to. Be honest with me about it because there's a lot more said to be in that. Yep. Or say, no, I haven't. And that's it. I'm taking your word on it. And our trust in our relationship actually started growing and building from there and getting better.
Yeah. And we can never say for 100% sure whether our kids don't do certain things, right? We don't know.
What did you do?
We don't know. Child? Right. And I think that's, part of it. But the thing is, if our children feel comfortable coming to us and saying, hey, I'm going to be honest, and we teach them like how to take responsibility for things like, hey, we do things in this world that we shouldn't do. Well, we also have to be ready to take the responsibility for the consequences that come with that.
And your kids see that through you apologizing to them.
That's exactly right. And you can have those healthy conversations with them, being upfront and honest with what the things that you are doing. Like Christy said, man, she'd go out and dig in his car sometimes. And I'm just like, in the house, I'm just like, man, she's driving herself nuts over this.
I was.
Nuts. She's downstairs looking up under ceiling tiles and like all kinds of stuff. And it's just like, okay, but then what, And then she finally realized like, no, that's not what I should be putting my energy into doing.
No.
It should be like, and I know the way that I grew up, like if I did something wrong and I was in my bedroom and I did it wrong, parents would be like, door's coming off. You don't deserve privacy anymore. And I'm like, okay, I'll just find it someplace else. Like it doesn't solve the problem, right? Deeper connection with our children is what solves the problem.
Relationship.
Yeah. And so how are you growing that? How are you connecting with them? Which leads us right to the very last question that you should be asking yourself if your kids are dabbling in drugs. And that's how involved with your kids are you? And I want to say something real quick before Christy shares on this one, because this one I'm really passionate about. We did early on in our marriage, we decided to forego spending money on other things to spending money on making our house the house where kids come and hang out. We wanted the hangout house, right? Yeah. We wanted the hangout house. And we did that for two main reasons. Number one, we love hanging out with our kids. Our kids are fun. Well, we're a little more fun than they are, but they're more fun now because of how fun we are.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two is we have more control over the situation that way. We have an opportunity to build deeper relationships with them and with their friends.
Yeah.
And we have an opportunity to be around the majority of the time when things are going on. So we have a better understanding of the situation that are in, and we get to see their friends. We get to understand their friends. We get to build a relationship with their friends, and we get to be around all of them on the majority of the time. So it created a safer haven. So that was really important for us.
We hung out with our kids and it made it to the point where we would do family fun night, family Friday fun night, and the friends would want to
Mark.
You
funny, Mark.
The kids would want to come over here because they're like, is your family doing the family fun night tonight? We do minute to win it games and we play, freeze tag in the dark and do all these fun things. We'd play basketball and Josh would make dinner for everybody or we'd order pizza. And we played with them. We hung out with them and we did things with them. And up until this last year, our kids hung out with us on New Year's Eve. Their friends would come over. Josh would make tons of food, wings and mozzarella cheese sticks.
Artery clogging food.
Like all of these things. And we'd bring the dining room table out into the living room and we'd play card games and we'd be, having the shows on to watch the ball drop and just eating all this food and telling jokes and just having a great time. Now, the kids, Jordan's married and the two oldest are both 19 now. So they weren't, saying like, no, I'm going out with my friends. Okay. I'm 19 years old. adult.
Right.
I don't need to be at home with mommy and
Eating
daddy.
cheese sticks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but up until last year, that was it, and they have fun around us. We're not constantly lecturing them. A lot of parents, when they're around their kids, it's constant lectures. It's constant teachings. Like, let's sit down and tell you
So
the
true.
realities of life. No, we wanted to hang out with them. We wanted to play basketball with them. We took them. Pokemon was big. All the friends would come over. We'd pile them in the van. We'd go to downtown Flint, where all the Pokestops were. We'd be out until like 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Which is really late for Christy.
Yes. Yes. Catching Pokemon, like walking around places, doing things. So we had a lot of fun. We invested in our kids and made our house a fun house. We constantly spent loads of money on food, constantly had chips and Gatorade and pop and snacky foods and Pop-Tarts and all this stuff. So they just had a constant supply of toilet paper.
Yeah, we had an average of 5 to 6 teenage boys here on the
Every weekend.
For years, and that is an expensive thing, but
we loved it.
We did love it, and we made sacrifices otherwise to do that. And that's why I think this is one of the most important points for us to end on is, how is your relationship with your kids? Is it that you go to work and then you have your own personal time that you do outside of work, and then all you have left is 5% of time to really hang out with your kids because they don't want to hang out with you? You need to try harder. You need to push harder. That relationship matters. Like, dig in, figure out what they want to do. Get on their level to say, hey, I want to have a better relationship with you on your terms. I want to do these things. Christy had to do all kinds of boy stuff. She didn't want to do this boy stuff, but she knew, she understood, like, if I'm going to have a relationship with these guys, like, I need to do the stuff that they like to do. I mean, she would play PS4 sometimes. She didn't know nothing about none of that stuff, okay? She didn't want to do it, but she understood the importance.
Especially that zombie game. That game was scary, okay? That would actually, like, freak me out because it's dark, and then it was in Call of Duty, but it was zombies, and you turn around, there's a scary guy there that's going to eat you. It was scary.
But it was funny watching her still try and attempt to do it and still want to be involved in it. So, your relationships with your children is what's going to make the biggest difference, especially when it comes to things like drugs. This is the problem, though. You can do everything right. You can do it all right. Your kids could go to every Sunday school class. They could go to church 6 days a week. You could do everything right, and your child could still end up using drugs. It's just a reality of life.
Accept it
and understand how to work through it.
And God already knows it's part of their story.
He does. And God, if you lean on God in those times and you lean on your spouse, especially in a blended family, and say, hey, we're in this together. This isn't your child's problem. This is our family issue that we have at hand, and we're going to get through this. Like, we are going to figure this out. We are going to take it one step at a time, and we're going to do the best thing that we can. And we're going to get more involved with our children. We're going to get more connected with our children. It's going to not be just, I'm screaming and yelling at you and telling you the things you shouldn't do. So,
and actually truly
so
believing
important.
that you're giving them over to God. Like, I need to be an influence in their life. Yes, I need to do what I can do, but I am giving them over to you. I need you to convict them. I need you to correct them, like, harshly if needed. God corrected me harshly growing up and in my 20s. And I needed it. I didn't learn quickly. I was very hard-headed and didn't learn things easily. And I just hope that he continues to correct them as frequently as he corrected me, and harshly if needed. I mean, smack them right back into shape, because you're going to do a much better job than me. And that is what took me couple years to figure out, and just be like, no, I'm going to love them. I'm going to talk with them. I'm going to have a relationship with them. I'm going to let them know they're unconditionally loved. And I'm going to give that to you to really, because he sees all the time, which I don't. So he knows their heart and he knows the truth. Yeah. So I need to depend on him to be my vengeance.
Bring it down on these children. It is important that we focus and know that they're God's children's before they're ours, and so one day those kids are going to grow up and they're going to be parents of their own, and they're going to see the way that you treated and handled them during these difficult times, and they're going to be better parents and better adults because of it. So understand that your reaction to something in a chaotic way is never helpful. It's not. We've done that. And it backfires every single time. And so if we want to create a safe haven for our children, especially in a blended family, which already doesn't feel safe a lot of times,
correct,
slow things down, and worry more about trying to create a deeper relationship with your kids and find them help if they really need it. If your kids seriously have a real drug problem, like a serious ongoing drug problem, get them the help they deserve, but do it in a loving way.
Yeah.
When we have a lady that goes to our church right now that she has adopted daughter that is struggling right now, and she is loving her through this. She's walking by her side through this and not trying to stand in front of her and drag her through it. And I think that's so important. If your children, and be real about it, if your kid's dabbling in things they shouldn't be, doesn't mean that they're going to be, a heroin addict, right? Mm-hmm. But be honest with yourselves about it, and then seek out the proper help and walk with them through it, with them, by their side as a support, not as somebody as I told you so, you better do this or else. That's never helpful. It's never helpful.
We've had families in our church struggle with their kids are struggling with drugs, more than one family, and we have two. So it's nuclear families, it's blended families. So this is a hot topic right now. But if you have lost your cool with your kids, it shows them how you correct it. It's going to make a difference too. Mm-hmm. Like, don't try not to lose your cool, but if you have, you need to fix that now. And you always can. Yeah. You can call them in, you can sit them down, you can be like, listen, I need to apologize for the way that I've been handling this. You are doing wrong by doing this. I love you. I care about you. I've lost my cool. It's not the proper way to handle it. I want us to be in this together and figure this out together. Apologize, because that's what's going to earn their respect. They're not going to hear you. No matter what you say, if they don't respect you, they will not hear, even if it's best intentions, they will not hear a single word if they do not respect you as a person.
Yeah, so true. If you haven't had an opportunity yet and you found some value out of our podcast, please do us a favor and hit the share button. That really does help us out a lot. If you do need something deeper, if you're looking for more help when it comes to the situation, please send us a message on Facebook. We would like to connect with you on a deeper level. Maybe it's something that you haven't felt comfortable sharing here on the podcast. We understand. Maybe you're watching or listening to this at a different time. So you can always reach out to us right here on Facebook, and we would love to support you in any way that we possibly can. So I want to thank you guys for being here. Do you have any final words, my love?
No.
Just pray about it. If that's happening to you right now, reach to God and pray about it.
And you will get through it.
You will. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you next Tuesday at 7 p.m.
Bye.